And the gentleman here will give me their advice, and the queen chooses whether or not to listen or not listen. And for the most part, you guys have been able to sway me a couple of times. So you guys keep bringing the good stuff. That Microsoft discussion we had last week was
I don't
awesome.
know. I didn't get my Starbucks coffee, Emily. I
Oh,
don't know if I don't know if my
you never
analysis is going to
you
be
never
spot
send me
on.
you never send me your address. I told you I will have those things on rotation. So
A
yeah, that is.
joke from when you were gone last week, man. A joke from when you were gone
I,
last
I'm assuming it was.
It
week.
was
No.
it was some good stuff. It was some good stuff on Queen's Court last week. So you guys never fail to give me some good ideas, thoughts on what I'm thinking. And I actually came in with a different stock in mind, but then you flashed me with something that I changed my mind in the middle of the halftime report. So I'm gonna go AMD here for
Hey,
question.
listen, that's why we come to the halftime report to
And you know what?
get ideas.
The cool thing is that we don't have to be loyal to these stocks, right? I was looking at one, and then we were like, maybe not, and then I'm looking at AMD, and I'm like, ooh, this is probably a better one. So
There's a lot of toys in the toy store for the stock traders.
yes, absolutely, I can
Mhm.
pick one up and drop it in a hot second and
Mhm.
pick up another one and not feel bad about it. So you obviously had AMD on the rapid fire pick here, but the type of trader that I am. I'm more on the position trading style. So obviously my question is going to lean more towards that. What do you think about something longer term here with AMD?
You know, whenever you're getting into the long-term conversation, Em, on any stock, the ultimate question of when to add is oftentimes done on a technical perspective for me. But before you click the button, there's got to be some degree of belief in the company, right? There's got to be some degree of fundamental belief because you're adding your investment capital to that company, not in a trade, which traders will trade anything. They don't care. They don't care about the fundamental nature of the company. They don't care. They care about the unemployment report because of the additional volatility that is expected. They could care less what the unemployment report says. They're focusing on their price thresholds more than anything else. From anything longer term, right? Anything from a position style where you're going to carry months to that ultimate investment conversation where typically when you invest in something, you're getting married to a certain extent. You're not looking to date that. You're looking to park. You're looking to, hang out. You're looking to buy a house, have a couple kids, do all that jazz. You're looking to get married to a certain extent. And you got to have a fundamental belief in the company. And so when you're looking at the semiconductor space, and you're just looking at it from a valuation perspective, I'm going to pull up FinViz here, just looking at some of the semiconductor components out there. Number one, we do have a little bit of a bullish bias on semiconductors right now. Tech is the leading sector within the aggressive sectors right now. Seeing a little bit of a little bit of overperformance right now in tech versus some of the other areas of the market. Semiconductors looks pretty decent in that environment. NVIDIA is fighting an all-time breakout, not an all-time breakout, but a 52-week high breakout. Taiwan Semiconductors trying to fight through some King's Bed type analysis. Broadcom had a really good report just yesterday or last week. Talked about them yesterday. They had a really good report, but these are companies that are fighting towards some degree of highs. And so when you're looking at that investment question, like for example on Broadcom, you're late to the party on the investment conversation. When you're looking at Nvidia, you're late to the party on that investment conversation. The question ultimately is, are you late on AMD? And so when you're looking at it from a pure technical perspective, AMD doesn't stand out on the daily chart versus any other chart here. It really doesn't. But when you go into the weekly chart here and you're looking at NVIDIA, yeah, like I said, you're a little bit late to that party. Look at that party. It's been going on for a while here. Texas Instruments not really doing anything. Broadcom's fighting that all-time breakout type threshold. You come over here and you're looking at Intel and it's like, oh, garbage, just absolutely garbage. AMD, Look at that pattern there. It just kind of stands out. A little bit of similar to Taiwan Semiconductor, but I think AMD is in a better reversal against the reversal analysis versus say the other positions like Taiwan Semiconductor. Microchip here looks pretty good on that weekly too. Look at that 80 threshold kind of stand out. So when I'm looking at it on the weekly chart, technically, just a couple stocks stand out. Taiwan stands out if it can confirm that King's bad. But it's a choppy stock right now from an international perspective. And so that's kind of, I don't want to say Taiwan's a stay away because it's a really, really, really good company, one of the better companies within the semiconductor space. It's just, it deals with a little bit of additional volatility right now than say an AMD or a microchip does. AMD coming in looks really healthy against that weekly chart. When you're looking at AMD from a fundamental perspective right now, it's you're going to look at some numbers that are not exactly great, and these numbers are the reason why AMD is not a tackle 25 stock, but it's a dirty sexy money stock. It's a good company. We have a fundamental belief in AMD, but AMD, like Nvidia, fights valuation questions all the time. All the time. If you're going to participate in AMD, if you're going to participate in Nvidia over the last 10 years, you're going to probably do so at an average PE ratio north of 50, most likely north of 60, north of 70. These are premium type stocks. Right now with AMD, the problem is AMD's price has went up pretty decently. Earnings hasn't in the last little bit. And so you do have a valuation question on AMD that you have to be able to overcome. And whether or not you're overcoming that based on the growth, whether or not which AMD does have significant growth in it, in its both in its past and in its projections of the future. And so you can overcome that valuation hesitation based on the growth that you're expecting, because if that growth comes in, well, what happens to AMD's PE ratio? It comes down. People are willing to pay higher valuation if they get a higher growth level. But you can also look at it from a forward PE ratio perspective, which takes into account some of that expected growth. And so the current PE ratio at 91 there's no other way to paint that other than that's really overvalued. Against the forward PE ratio of 18, that when you see something as radical as that, it's there's some short-term issues from an earnings perspective. And as the dude who covers earnings for tackle trading, I'm going to agree with that. There's some short-term issues from an earnings perspective. But remember, the entire analysis this year was struggle in the first half, recover in the second half. That was everybody's projection, from Wall Street to most of us in the podcast projections on coming into this year, was struggle in the first half, growth in the second half. Well, that's playing out a little bit here just from a raw fundamental numbers perspective. You see the concern in the current P ratio. You see the growth of the future. And if the growth of the future comes in, that's where the forward P ratio of 18, which I doubt you're going to get an 18 P ratio on AMD. That's just not normally part of AMD's equation. But a 30, 25, that certainly does make some sense. So you're dealing with some overextended situations that you're going to have to be able to overcome, either through one, looking at the growth side of the equation, number two, looking at the strength from a technical perspective, because you can overcome the growth question if you have a really good entry where you can cover your risk a little bit. And that's what I think the argument for AMD is. Yeah, it was my rapid fire pick from the weekend. But the reason it was my rapid fire pick from the weekend is because I saw I saw a King's bed formation on the daily chart, but it was really the strength of the weekly chart that was in the back of my mind when I was doing the rapid fire video over the weekend for the newsletter. AMD just has a really simple get out mechanism, in my estimation. When you're looking specifically at this from a position trade, an investment, if it breaks 76, you're like either one, you cover, two, you add a put option, you do something like that from an investment perspective. So if AMD is an investment, you basically say, I love the bullish retracement on the weekly chart. I love the foundational support at 76, right where that 200 weekly is. I love the fact that it came into the previous old resistance is a new support. And by the way, that old resistance isn't just old resistance. It's got a lot of chop left of the chart as a support level as well. There is a lot of support right here on AMD. And so when you're looking at this technically, from a position trader's perspective, I would say your entry is right now. Like that's your entry on AMD. It's right now. You're confirming it's right now. And your trade management on a position trade is basically, as long as you stay above 76, do whatever you want. Go to 80, go to 79. Just don't go to 75.99. Just stay above that support level. And as long as support takes care of itself, we'll navigate the resistance conversations on that position trade. And so I think because of where the positioning is on the weekly chart, you just have one of those moments where you're saying, okay, I got a cheap risk type environment for a stock that can absolutely fly, and we can get a stop loss right under 76, which means we're going to take a little bit of risk here. But for us to get stopped out on that position trade, you got to violate your current trend, you got to violate your current momentum, and you got to ultimately violate a very, very, very important support level, which is an obvious get out moment. That's the position trade. When you're looking at this from an investment perspective, obviously and from an investment perspective, I want to put a stop loss under 76. I think from the number one difference between the position versus the investor is the position trader will utilize a stop loss, whereas the investor is not just going to get out because an intermediate pivot failed in a volatile environment. They would have a different management system. Everything I said on the strength of the support level is the exact same. The difference is for a company like AMD, you would immediately go into writing covered calls. You would immediately go into, collaring trades. You would immediately going into your cash flow and protection toolbox to be able to cover the risk on AMD. And so from a positioning perspective, I do think you can overcome the overvaluation in the short term, given the context around the earnings conversation and the strength of the weekly chart, with the expectation that there will be a growth conversation for AMD. And I think that's one of the reasons why they're holding up a little bit, not just AMD, but the semiconductors in general against some of this volatility here today is because of that, what we're talking about right now. I just think the debate for me on AMD is, the swing trade, that we prep that's in the scanner report. Go check it out. It's in the rapid fire video. If you want to get that type of prep work done on a weekly basis, definitely become a pro member of Tackle Trading. Check out the newsletter and start watching the rapid fire video on a weekly basis as well. That's dialed in. We do that every single week for our community. But from a longer term perspective, I think the debate is between position and investment specifically for you. Obviously, I'm tailoring my conversation specifically to you, Em, but I'd say the debate is between the position and the investment. The investment is you're parking and you're going to use creative money management techniques under 76. Without that skill set, I would say position trade stop loss under 76 and let it go.